thank Bev George for being our host for Zoom this evening. It makes all the difference. We don't have that kind of an account, and Bev does, and she was gracious enough to give us her time tonight. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and I did a program similar to the one we're going to do tonight 2 years ago for the Democratic Women of DuPage County, but we didn't do it during April. So I'm really happy that this program can come together again for April. I did some research back in 2019 on this topic, and the numbers are staggering. 1 in 5 women can expect to be sexually assaulted over the course of their lifetime. 1 in 71 men. The only numbers I could find online were from 2019, and we know this is maybe the most underreported crime there is. But in 2019, about 450,000 women were reported a sexual assault, about 71,000 men. So we have a disproportionate number of women coming forward, but that's equivalent to the numbers of folks that have died from COVID this year. It's over 500,000 people in 1 year. That's how prevalent this is. And we're going to learn tonight an awful lot about how the victims are treated, what a victim feels like. We're going to look at advocacy on behalf of victims and prosecution of the perpetrators. We're going to have an opportunity to create questions in chat. And we've got a couple that the team generated, but I'm hoping that some of you as well have questions. And Colleen's going to tell us a way that we can actually help. And it's called The Closet. And you'll learn more about that from Colleen Zavodny from the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago's Rape Crisis Center. So I'm going to turn the program over to Rebecca Gamboa and to Jean Page, who are going to introduce our first speaker. Rebecca, do you want to start?
Sure. So Kerry O'Connor graduated from Rush University's College of Nursing in 1995, and since then has worked in several different areas of nursing. Elmhurst Hospital Emergency Department has been her professional home since 2001, where she has worked as a staff nurse, team leader, sexual assault nurse examiner, or SANE, and case manager. She has recently taken on the position of the system-wide SANE coordinator for Edward Elmhurst Health and is working to implement goals of the Sexual Assault Survivors Emergency Treatment Act, designed to improve the care of sexual assault victims throughout the state of Illinois. So,
Kerry, you're on. Kerry? Did we just lose Kerry?
Sorry.
Kerry.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay.
I was trying to unmute. One last threat to my kids to be quiet. All right. So I am going to hopefully share my screen here. So I am going to start out with, we had kind of a great introduction by Diane about how underreported sexual assault is, and kind of a look at the numbers. And when you look at those numbers, you have to think about those are the ones coming forward. And for everyone that comes forward, there's several that are not coming forward. So there's an organization called End Violence Against Women International, and they have a campaign called Start by Believing that really is it's a public awareness campaign, and it is aimed at just raising awareness of the public and kind of encouraging people to just stop and think when somebody reports to them or suggests to them that something is happening, and just kind of, stop and take a moment and believe what they're saying instead of some of the victim blaming that goes on. So I'm going to hope that this, So they do a video every year, and they release it every April. And this was this year's video that was just released last week. So kind of put some insight into what's going on. Tell them to be quiet. Don't.
Kerry, I can't see your screen. Can anyone else?
Oh. I thought it was going too easy.
Kerry, is it on the Valley website?
It is.
Okay, I'll try to pull it up also.
Let me try it. Let me try it this.
Kerry and Colleen are friends for all of you. They work together a great deal.
Can you see my screen now?
I see you.
Not,
Oh.
no, we can't.
Oh, so you just saw me yelling at my son, didn't you?
Just a little bit.
Sorry.
We saw the mama look. No.
I'm home with 5 kids and 2 dogs, if you hear anything in the background.
5 little ones. Wow.
Here?
There it is.
Yay.
Well,
My daughter's helping me. But now how do I, where's my? Okay. I don't know how to get there. But that was on what I was, that's what I was sharing. Here, this one?
yeah, this is it.
Yes,
Can you see it now?
Okay, we
yes.
can.
Okay. Hopefully I can find my way back when it's over.
That would be good.
Thank you. Don't go away. 'Cause I don't know how to get back.
Kerry, you might want to mute yourself.
Kerry, is there supposed to be music with it?
Yes.
Okay, you need to go in and share the sound also.
Oh dear, I don't know how to do that. Sorry.
We can read.
Don't hit stop. Just play it. It's just music. We're just gonna go without music if that's okay.
Yeah.
Here. Oh my God. Okay. Now, can you see my PowerPoint?
We can.
Okay, perfect. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to get back to it. So here on the left side, that's the link to the video there. It's on the Start by Believing website. And that on the left side of the screen there is just the pledge. And the people that were talking in the video, they were all taking the pledge. And it's I start by believing when somebody discloses to me or when someone says that they were assaulted or something happened to them. So there's a lot of fun things on the website. It is a campaign that is about 10, 11 years old now, I think, and is really a phenomenal campaign. There's a lot of great personal stories on the website of people that it's kind of turned around their way of looking at things and their way of responding to people that disclose to them. So just really quickly moving forward, I know I only have a few minutes. So a sexual assault nurse examiner is it's a new profession or a new subspecialty of medicine in Illinois. And when I say new, I probably mean it's really taken a strong hold probably about 15 years ago is when we started seeing SANEs. Prior to that, there was one program down that I think started in the 90s in Champaign-Urbana with Patty Metzler was the coordinator there, and she actually just retired. So that was our first program here in the state of Illinois. When Lisa Madigan was the Attorney General, she really kind of pushed for this and is one of the people that kind of got this program off the ground in Illinois. So nationwide, it's still not, I think the SANE nursing began really in the 70s. So it's not that old of a profession. But so the basic definition, sexual assault nurse examiners, we are registered nurses. We've completed specialized education and clinical preparation in the medical forensic care of the patient who has experienced sexual assault or abuse. So all of our training, if you think of what a sexual assault patient goes through from the time they would report it to either police or to an advocate or to a friend, kind of every step that they would go through until it would go to trial, we have clinical training in that. So we have our classroom part of it, and then we have the clinical training where we kind of walk through every process that our patients would walk through, so that we could really speak to it with them and understand what they're going through. So just really quickly, a little bit about our program here at Edward and Elmhurst Hospital. I have been at Elmhurst in charge of the SANE program there for about 15 years. I was the first SANE that was at Elmhurst, and we've kind of grown. We have, like anything else, we have periods where we have a lot and periods where we don't have as many. But thanks to SACETA and the laws that are passing in Illinois, or have passed, and are kind of the compliance dates are coming up, where in January of 2022, every hospital emergency room that takes care of sexual assault patients or has a treatment plan on file with IDPH, or Illinois Department of Public Health, will have to have 24/7 access to a forensic nurse or a SAFE, which is like the physician equivalent to a SANE. It stands for Sexual Assault Forensic Examiner. So that is a huge step in Illinois. It's a huge step nationwide. We are the only state that has mandated anything even close to that. So it's super exciting. We've got some really good things happening in Illinois for our sexual assault patients. So just some of the things quickly that we do. We take care of the patient basically from the time they come into the ER until they are discharged. We are one-on-one care with them. So we don't, the average emergency room nurse has 4 patients typically that they're taking care of. So it's nice that our sexual assault patients can have one-on-one care and have that dedicated care to them. So one of the things that we could do, there's a lot of mystery. Everybody talks about the evidence kit or the rape kit. Personally, I don't like the word rape kit. It's an evidence collection kit. And this is what it looks like. Every hospital in the state of Illinois, they're made by and designed by the Illinois State Police. Every hospital starts with the same kit. Every patient that wants evidence collected gets the same kit, and then, but what we put into it can have a lot of variation. So that's one of the things that SANEs have a lot of extensive training in, is evidence collection and kind of the creativity of how to find evidence and where to look for evidence and then how to collect it. So patients, of course, have a choice. They don't have to have evidence collected. There's different reporting choices. On average, I think the average sexual assault patient in the emergency room, it makes 35 decisions or choices in their care on kind of what way they want to go. So some of those choices of care are if they want to talk to police, if they want to report their assault to the police. Within that choice, there's an option for them to talk to the police on their own, or for a third-party reporter, a medical professional making a third-party report. We can report it for them if they're just not ready to talk to the police yet. And then the third one is an anonymous report, where we report that they were assaulted, but we don't give them any demographic information about the patient. So it's a completely anonymous report. And then within each of those decisions, they can decide if they want evidence collected or not. If they do decide to have evidence collected, they don't have to release it to be analyzed right away. So they have the option to keep it anonymous. If it's anonymous, it does not get analyzed. If they do want it analyzed, then of course their name, they have to make a police or be cooperative with the police report and move forward with an investigation with the police. Or they can choose to have it held for 10 years or 10 years past their 18th birthday, depending on how old they were when they were assaulted. So there is that option if they're not ready to move forward yet. Of course, the best time to collect evidence is the sooner the better from the time of the assault. The law says in Illinois, we have to offer evidence collection for 7 days. There's some situations where SANEs can move beyond that 7 days and still collect pieces of evidence, not everything, but there's some areas of evidence we can still collect. So there's a lot of, there's some variation, there's some gray areas on, when we can collect evidence past that 7 days. But basically, we're there to advocate for the patient. I always say that my biggest job is as an educator to the patient, to help them understand what all their choices are, since there is so many, and then just help them to make the best decisions they can for themselves at that moment in time. So some of the other things they have to decide: if they want forensic photography, if they want, it's not an all or nothing. They don't have to have every piece of evidence in the kit collected. They can, if they get tired or overwhelmed or change their mind or anything partway through, they always have the option to stop evidence collection. If they decide they don't want evidence collected, they have that 7 days to come back into the hospital and get their evidence collected, as long as it's within that 7 days since their assault. So there's a lot of mystery, I feel like, around what goes into the kit and what happens actually in the hospital. So this is just kind of a picture of some of the things that we use to collect evidence. So you can see there are some just cotton tip swab. That's what we collect most of our evidence with, those cotton tip swabs. There's some combs that we can comb evidence out of their hair. That little card that you see with the 5 red dots on the top right hand of the screen, that is a card that we take just a few drops of blood. We just do a finger prick with the patient, and because anything that's in the evidence collection kit is going to have at least the patient's DNA on it. So that's a reference card for the lab. Those kind of fat swabs at the top there, the forensic blue swabs, that's a dye called toluidine blue dye that we can use to find microscopic abrasions or injuries in genital tissue. So that's another kind of trick that we have. Some other things that we can do, we have like a Foley catheter. We have these giant Q-tips that help us do more of the genital exam and get a good look. Of course, we use a digital camera for the forensic photography. Again, if the patient doesn't want pictures, they don't have to have pictures. A colposcope is another, it's kind of a magnifying camera system that we have. Nothing goes inside the patient or touches the patient, but it's just another option for photography and for our exam. Those little kind of boxes, one of them says miscellaneous stains and bite mark evidence. So this was something that Illinois State Police developed many years ago with our kits. You can see that top box has a little hole in the side. There's actually a hole punched into the sides, and that's to increase airflow. The only thing that will degrade DNA is mold or moisture. So that's why all of our things, all of our swabs, all of our evidence, everything that we collect will always go in cardboard or paper. So paper bags, cardboard boxes. We use just plain paper to bindle things, to bindle the pieces of evidence that we get and put within the kit. So that's kind of an overview of what we do in the kit. We make sure that they are have the option of medication before they leave to prevent STIs. We can give them HIV prophylaxis if they present within 72 hours of their assault. We can offer them pregnancy prevention. There's a couple of different medications now that they use for that. We make sure that they have follow-up. We call the advocate first thing when they come in to the ER. That's something that we do from triage. Things of course have looked a little bit different in that sense in the last year because of COVID, but I think we're getting back on track where our advocates are able to come back into the hospital now and to stay with our patients. So they have, if nobody else, we have an advocate there for a support system, and they really are kind of our right hand people when we're collecting evidence and doing our exams. So these are just what's on the screen now, just a little bit of just a little trivia, I guess, or facts from Edward Elmhurst in the last 2 years. We really have come a long way. As I said, Elmhurst we've had SANEs for about 12 years. Edward started out with 1 SANE 2 years ago. We're up to 7 right now. And we have 9 more that are completing their clinical training, and we're sending 3 more to training in July. So we really want to make sure we've kind of packed our numbers so that in January we're able to provide that 24/7 coverage. Something else we're doing, we have just recently decided at Edward Elmhurst that we're going to make Edward Hospital a resource area for pediatric patients, which is kind of another, it's kind of a subspecialty within SANE nursing. So there's adult adolescent that goes from 13 and over, and then our pediatric certification is for 12 and under. So those numbers of SANEs in Illinois are very low. I think there's 19 certified pediatric sexual assault nurse examiners. So it's going to be a big deal. It'll be super exciting when we're able to provide that care for pediatric patients come January. So that's kind of the down and dirty version of what we do in the hospital and kind of what we can offer our patients. Oops. What we can offer to our what we can offer to our patients when they come in. So
Thank you so much, Kerry. And Jean, introduce Colleen.
Colleen Zavodny, Manager of Advocacy and Crisis Intervention for the YWCA Chicago's Rape Crisis Center, has been providing comprehensive and victim-centered advocacy services for survivors of sexual violence since 2008. She oversees a team of 25 staff and volunteers to provide dozens of professional trainings to police departments each year, and was the driving force behind creating a multidisciplinary sexual assault resource team in DuPage County. I think I skipped a sentence there. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Colleen, you want to take it from here?
All right, so first off, thank you everyone for giving up some virtual Zoom time on a Tuesday night to hear about sexual assault in the community. It's really awesome to see some faces on here that I haven't seen in a while, and it's always nice to see Kerry and Laura and Diane. So again, thank you very much. I am super happy to be here today. I was going to show a little bit of a video, but I think I'm just going to show part of a PowerPoint. And actually, I did part of this PowerPoint earlier today for a law enforcement training. I just kind of hid some slides and condensed it down. So with that being said, I'm going to talk about the role of an advocate. All right. Okay, so I'm also going to talk about what is a rape crisis center, because there are a lot of them throughout the state of Illinois, but a lot of times people don't know what a rape crisis center actually does. So within our sexual violence support services department, we have 4 tiers. One of them is education and training. So in compliance with Aaron's Law, we have a team of prevention educators that goes out to the DuPage County schools. They right now have been doing it virtually because of COVID, but normally they're in classrooms on an individual basis. They are in classrooms from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. And then we also do a lot with higher ed as well. So they talk about bodily autonomy, body safety. They talk about what is a good secret, what is a bad secret. And obviously it's tailored to the age that we're presenting to the children. So once we get into junior high, we're talking about teens taking charge. We're starting to talk a little bit more about like acquaintance rape. What is a good relationship? What is a bad relationship? What are red flags to a good or a bad relationship? We also, with our prevention team and our advocacy team, do a lot of community outreach and events. So we might be tabling at College of DuPage or Benedictine University, the Glendale Heights Safety Fair every year, national night outs with police departments. And then our prevention team, as well as our advocacy team, do a lot of professional training. So earlier today, I was training for the Northeast Multi-Regional Training Institute for a piece of legislation that was put in place for law enforcement that said that all investigators had to have 16 hours of training and all patrol officers had to have 8 hours of training. And Kerry actually joins in on some of those trainings as well. So that's a little bit about our prevention department, our education and training. Our advocacy department is where I am actually from. It is 24 hours a day. It's 365 days a year. We are first responders to victims of sexual violence or survivors of sexual violence in a hospital or police department or at the DuPage County Courthouse. I'm specifically talking about DuPage County for this presentation. We also then have a 24-hour rape crisis hotline that is confidential and anonymous. And we are super excited that during COVID, we rolled out from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m., we have a text and chat line as well that is confidential and anonymous. And then lastly, we have our counseling services. So those are for individual or group counseling. It is for any survivor of sexual violence or their non-offending loved ones. And that still is, right now it's virtual, but normally it is in person. As Kerry did hint, because of COVID, some of our services had to, they had to be over the phone for a little while. However, we are, I would say 90% back in to all of our hospitals. We do have some volunteers that have come back after COVID, and all of our staff are now responding in person to hospital calls. So rape crisis centers are governed by the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault, or ICASA, and our goals are to assure that survivors are treated with dignity and compassion, and then also to affect change in the way that medical institutions, law enforcement, and society respond to survivors of sexual violence. If you are not in DuPage County, but you want to know where your local rape crisis center is, you can go to icasa.org, type in the zip code, and it'll populate the corresponding rape crisis center to that zip code. All right. So what do? We really work in partnership with our systems that we work with, but we are primarily there to promote safety for the survivor, create an environment where they feel empowered, and to reduce the trauma experienced by them. Kerry went into a little bit about the evidence collection kit. We're there to really hold their hand through the whole process. Sometimes it's physically holding their hand. Sometimes I've left a hospital call and I've known every aspect of the survivor's story. And then I remember distinctly a hospital call that I responded to where the survivor didn't want to talk about the assault, but by the time I left that call, I could have literally sat down at the kitchen table or the dining room table with her family on Thanksgiving, and I knew everything about her grandchildren. And that's what she needed to talk about to keep her mind off of having the evidence collection kit done. And that was my role there. We also identify needs, areas of concerns. We assess strengths of the client. We collaborate to evaluate service goals. And we're there to support the survivor's choices and advocate for fair and non-judgmental treatment. So we're there over the phone, in person, at any emergency room in DuPage County, at any police department in DuPage County, and we primarily work based off of crisis intervention skills and empathy. We talk to survivors about their legal, their medical, and their personal options following an assault. We ask them, are they wanting to report to law enforcement? If they say no, we talk to them about like what's preventing them from working with law enforcement. And if somebody says no and they're very adamant in that no, we're not going to push the issue and say you have to do this. But we do want to make sure that they have everything that they need to make the most informed decision that they possibly can. We talk to them about what to expect at each stage of the process. A lot of times survivors are very worried about like, well, what if this goes to court? What if my name is in the paper? Unless they release their name to the general media, their name is never going to be in the paper and their name is going to be protected. We are also there to support non-offending significant others and loved ones, and then navigate unforeseen challenges. So if the survivor needs transportation to the courthouse the next day, if they don't have a place to stay, then we're looking for emergency shelter. If they are trying to decide whether or not they want to report to law enforcement and they're just not sure, sometimes we'll make a little meeting with the detectives, and the detectives will just interview, or they'll just meet with the survivor and just say like, hey, this is who I am. Like, tell me a little bit about yourself. Not necessarily initiating the investigation, but just kind of to get to know you, to make sure that the survivor feels comfortable working with that law enforcement jurisdiction. We don't make decisions for the victim. We don't tell them what they have to do. We don't discourage reporting to law enforcement. This obviously is for law enforcement. We don't oversee their interviewing process. And we never tell somebody what is going to happen with their case, because we just don't know. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat in a few minutes, but a lot of times we help with those ancillary needs, housing, clothing. Kerry would be able to tell you, but every time we go to a hospital, if the survivor has their clothing taken throughout the evidence collection kit, because it is evidence, there might be DNA evidence on their clothes, or there might be other evidence that's on their clothes. The nurses will go ahead and take their clothing and then hand it over to law enforcement in the correct way, maintaining chain of custody. And then we will go ahead and provide them with a sweatsuit, with socks, with underwear, flip-flops for the summer. We try to make sure that we have sneakers or something that they can leave the hospital in clothing that they feel comfortable in, because we all know those wonderful hospital gowns are not so wonderful. They are not wonderful at all. So I will go ahead and put that in the chat box as soon as I am done with this presentation. We act as a liaison with the police department, with the state's attorney's office. We can accompany them to court, or we can go to court on their behalf. And then we also help with protective orders. So yesterday, it was a nice Monday. I had absolutely nothing on my calendar. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to get some statting done today and be able to do some of my admin duties. And lo and behold, I ended up spending 4 hours at the DuPage County Courthouse filling out a protective order, and another 3 hours at the police department helping a survivor report and making sure that she had some pictures of bruises taken for evidence. What else do? We help with crime victims' compensation. If somebody needs to leave their apartment complex because the offender knows where they live and they're fearing for their safety, we can help them either get their locks changed, we can help them break their lease without repercussion, or we can help them find another unit within the apartment complex to move to if they just don't feel safe within that unit. We also can write letters for VESA, which allows employees VESA allows employees who are victims of gender-based violence to take up to 12 weeks of unpaid time off. So we would go ahead and write a letter, submit it to HR. If HR has any questions, they'd be able to contact us. We don't ever disclose the details of a case. So it would be a very standard letter of like, Ms. Brown, hopefully no one's last name is Brown on this because I hate using somebody's last name. Ms. Brown is working with a victim services agency, and they are going to need to enact VESA. It doesn't say anything about what happened or how it happened. It just has a date and that they're enacting VESA. We also help with Title IX. So if somebody's been a victim of gender-based violence within the institution, or if they've been impacted by gender-based violence and need accommodations to their schedule, we can assist with that. Safety planning, and then referrals to counseling and case management. So I'm going to skip a couple of these slides. But I did start a multidisciplinary team in DuPage County. I would say I didn't start it. Myself and my team started it with the help of a lot of wonderful people, Kerry O'Connor included in that. And the multidisciplinary team includes victim advocates, medical personnel, law enforcement, and prosecutors. And the reason that we started this is because there's a lot of great systems, but we weren't necessarily working together and communicating with one another. So throughout this team, we've been able to do some really great training about, like, for law enforcement, like, what is the medical side? What happens when someone goes in to do an evidence collection kit? For medical personnel, we've been able to train them on what is it like when a detective is asking investigative questions? What type of questions need to be asked? And then obviously from the prosecutor side as well. This is our 24-hour rape crisis hotline, and obviously that is my information. I covered a lot very, very fast. And I am seeing that there is something in the chat. Oh, in terms of outreach, after somebody leaves an emergency room, we do not just stop and say like, okay, well, we helped you in the emergency room. Great, that's wonderful. What happens is that we coordinate follow-up calls with the survivor, and we make sure that we're touching base with them. We make sure that if they are going to do an interview with a detective, that we can accompany them to the detective interview. If they want a 24-hour follow-up call, 48-hour follow-up call, and we develop service goals with them. And then we work off of those service goals. And then ideally we work to get them into a long-term clinical setting, but sometimes survivors aren't ready to be in a clinical setting yet. And they're not really at the point where they want to work through their trauma, which sometimes they come back 2-3 years later and they're like, hey, you were my advocate. Can you go ahead and give me some counseling referrals now? I've got a case that's coming up where the victim has been apprehensive about getting counseling resources. And she was kind of like, I'm not really in a place where I want to talk about it yet. But she has some things that are coming up lately. And so she reached out to me just the other day. Actually, we've been in contact, but she reached out to me the other day and she's like, I think I'm ready for counseling now. It's been 2 years. Awesome. We've got those counseling resources available for you. All right, so I did put the link to the donation if you want to make a monetary donation so we can purchase sweatpants, sweatshirts, t-shirts, underwear, sports bras, flip-flops, and things like that. It is really great to be able to give a survivor clothing after they've had theirs taken for evidence. So any little bit definitely helps. And if anyone else is looking for something fun to do for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I can also put the link to our Stop the Stigma virtual 5K. Well, it's a walk, run, or roll. So it's either a 1 mile walk, a 5K run, or a 10-mile bike. We put the 10-mile bike in there because I'm not allowed to run. So I'll go ahead and put that into the chat at some point as well, but I'll go ahead and hand it over to the next person. And thank you all.
Okay, this will be, I think, Rebecca introducing Madeleine Thompson.
Madeleine Thompson grew up in Lisle, Illinois, and received a BS in environmental engineering from the University of Notre Dame and worked as an engineer for a general contractor in Chicago for 3 years after graduating. She is now a full-time law student, finishing her first year at Loyola University School of Law. Madeleine is here tonight to share her personal experience as a victim of an attempted drug-assisted sexual assault.
Thanks, I have a little bit of imposter syndrome because I am not an expert in anything we're talking about, but I'm happy to be here and talk about a personal experience. So a few years ago, when I was working, I went to a happy hour with some of my coworkers after work. I was only there for a short period of time, and then I was supposed to meet my family for a Christmas party, actually. So I was at this happy hour. I only remember having about like 2 beers, and then I can hardly remember the rest of the night. And on my way to my family Christmas party, I used a rideshare app to get a car to take me there. That driver never took me to my location. I was pretty incapacitated, and I was found by another couple being dragged out of my car by the driver, and they found me lying on the concrete. I had bruises all down my face and my body. The couple that found me were able to get me to my family safely, taken to the hospital, and the nurses told me once I was in the hospital that it was very likely that I had been drugged. So I'm very lucky that nothing worse did happen to me, and it wasn't actually like a sexual assault. And it definitely could have been. So I'm very lucky that people were able to find me before anything worse had happened. But I've shared this story a few times before to this group, when we did it 2 years ago. And I was met with a lot of support and kindness. But I've also shared this story before and faced a lot of criticism, kind of like, well, you were drinking at the bar. Like, are you sure you didn't drink too much? Or someone told my mom once, you know, this thing would never happen to my daughter because I taught her to be careful. Implying somehow that I was reckless, or that I brought this behavior upon myself, or that I should have known better than to do what everyone else at that bar was doing and have a few drinks. And I think it's important to share, because I think about, you know, the criticism that I face. And when I think about that, I just think about all the other women who have come forward, who are victims of sexual assault and who have probably faced the exact same criticism. And I think about women who are in more vulnerable positions than I am, and people who this has, you know, disproportionate impacts on, like women of color and people in the LGBTQ community. And I just remember being, ever since I was young, as a young woman, you're kind of always told that you're going to be a target for this kind of behavior, like for this kind of assault. And like, I remember being a freshman in college, and at our freshman orientation, they told all of us that 1 in 5 women get sexually assaulted, and that it's extremely prevalent on college campuses. And the message was basically for women to be careful and to look out for each other and take care of each other. And I think that that's wise, and we should all do that. And I have a great group of girlfriends, and I think we all do a very good job of taking care of each other. But I think what confuses me is that there isn't as loud of a message on the other side saying, you know, not just that women should be careful and protect themselves, but admonishing or warning the possible perpetrators of these crimes to not do, you know, these actions. And I think when we talk about it a lot, we talk about women having to take care of themselves, and that's always like the focus. And so that when something does happen, you start to blame yourself and think, oh, I didn't take enough good care of myself. I wasn't like being careful. I should have done more. When really, you know, I can't stop someone from harming me if they're going to harm me. And I think maybe we would get more reporting of these crimes if, you know, women are met with support instead of questioning. A lot of times I felt like I was on trial when I would share my story, which just made me not want to share my story. So I think the way that we can change, even from a young age, with young boys and girls talking about these things, talking about consent and changing the rhetoric behind it, is going to be really important. And I just think the more we can kind of shift it away from victim blaming and talking about, you know, what the victim was doing or what the victim should have been doing, and instead focusing on, you know, what this predator actually did, it's going to make a huge difference. And this last few weeks, I've been thinking a lot about the Minnesota Supreme Court case where they reversed a sexual assault conviction because the woman was voluntarily intoxicated. And according to the Minnesota statute, voluntary intoxication meant that she wasn't mentally incapacitated, meaning that she was able to give consent. And that really worries me a lot too, because just because someone's voluntarily intoxicated doesn't give anyone the right to harm them. And so I think also focusing on legislation, I know we're not in Minnesota, so Illinois is different, but that was very worrisome to me to read about. And so just pushing for legislation that helps women, you know, find support and actually get justice for these crimes. And again, just kind of shifting our perspective in our language when we talk about these crimes, and instead of just asking the victim, you know, all these questions, just remembering to support them and listen to them and hear them. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Maddie. Start by believing, right? Okay, it's going to be Jean introducing Marie Czech. Jean?
Got it. Marie Czech received her Juris Doctor degree from the University of Notre Dame in 1981. Her career, spanning 4 decades, has been devoted entirely to the criminal justice system. She served as an assistant state's attorney in Cook County from 1981 to 2012. In 2012, Marie joined the Will County State's Attorney's Office, where she currently works. She has taken 2 cases to the United States Supreme Court. In 2003, she received an award from the National District Attorneys Association for diligence and tenacity in prosecuting the most difficult of cases, 2 of which involved aggravated criminal sexual assault and murder.
Marie, it's your turn.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. And Maddie, your story was beautifully told and very compelling. Thank you. I'm proud to say that I actually watched Maddie grow up. She's a very good friend of one of my daughters. So my talk tonight is about what happens when you call the police. You've had the assault, you're in the hospital, you're upset. Now what happens? If you choose to go forward and call the police, the first thing they will want to do is interview you. They'll ask you all the questions that no one wants to hear after an assault like this. You know, what happened? Who was it? What did you see? Give us details. Exactly what did he do and when did he do it? We're trying to establish the body of the crime, the corpus of the crime. And so we need to know, you know, was there an assault? Who was the perpetrator, if you know? And was there consent? Those are the 3 things we have to establish at the outset. So in the hospital, the rape collection kit that Kerry talked about is actually quite critical, but it's a difficult step for the victim. She didn't say some of the things that happened. So while the sex assault nurse examiner is there in the room with the victim, I noticed that everyone else calls the person who has been assaulted the survivor, which is probably a better way to go. My office is stuck on victim, but there's also the use of the victim in the Illinois Supreme Court. So I'm sorry, in the Illinois Constitution. So I'm going to sit with victim for my little section here. Anyway, the victim needs to disrobe piece by piece, standing on a big white sheet in case any hair, any particle, anything
Mm. Looks like we're having trouble with Marie's connection. Marie, are you still on?
Yeah, my computer, I just fell off, but I came back. Am I?
Oh,
Can you
okay.
see me?
Yeah, now we see you.
I've fallen off twice now. I don't know what the problem is. In any case, I'll pick up where I left off. So in the hospital, we need to determine that there was an assault and who the assaulter was. So that's why the rape kit is so critical. But you have to literally, it's a difficult process. You have to disrobe on this mat, and then each piece one at a time, each is collected, put into a bag. And then the mat at the end is collected and pulled up from you. So it's a difficult process. The whole process is difficult. If you have received bruises, then the chances that's enough corroboration for the state to charge, assuming that there's proof that there was an assault and that we know who the assaulter was, then that's enough for the state to charge the offense. If there are no bruises, they look under your fingernails to see if you've maybe scratched at somebody. If there are no bruises, though, and that happens, right, at date rape, then we're looking for further corroboration. And where do we look for that? We can look at your phone to see if there are text messages. We can look to see if there are phone calls made to and from the perpetrator. So if there are phone calls or there are text messages, but text messages are the best evidence if we can get it, where he's saying something threatening to you, or he's, trying to entice you to come someplace that, out of the way. Those are good corroborating facts. But if we don't have that, and we don't have any phone calls, and it's your word against his, then the state is up against it, right? So it's not a question of not believing, it's a question of, can we prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person committed this assault? So our police are out there then looking for further corroboration. We're looking for something that supports somebody else in the bar who saw him, who saw you say no, who saw him bothering you. Anything that will help support a reasonable doubt. We need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a big standard to prove, and it's an awesome responsibility to bring a case against someone and take their freedom. I'm not saying that we don't want to prosecute every case we can. We do, and we do prosecute every case we can. But it's a heavy burden. Once the case is brought, once we've established that we've got charges, then what happens? Then you need to prepare to testify. So in Will County, where I work, but also in DuPage County and in Cook County, I know for sure those three, they all have victim advocates. So much like Colleen was talking about, only people who work for the state's attorney's office, who are familiar with the criminal justice system and step by step. So every time you need to talk to an assistant state's attorney, that victim advocate will be with you. And you will have to talk to an assistant state's attorney.
Whoops. You think this is coming back, Marie? Marie, can you hear us? Well, we could come back. Bev is
Muted.
So,
Mrs. Check, you're
okay,
muted.
my apologies. Okay. So you'll have to talk to an assistant state's attorney many times. We'll have to go through your story in stark detail many times. We'll need to get the sequence of events down. It's very difficult on the person who has to testify. I understand that. And so we have the victim advocates, who are social workers who are trained specifically in this kind of work, to try and give support to someone in the position of someone who has been assaulted, someone who has been hurt, but who has to testify. So they'll be with you every time you talk to the lawyers. They'll be with you every time you go to court.
Darn, Marie's having trouble with her computer connection, isn't she?
Yeah.
And it's such wonderful information, such good information. Is Maura Hirschauer on the call? She is the one who's next. I don't know if we should take a break from Marie and come back to her.
I'm here.
Okay, well, maybe I'll send a message. Maybe Marie can see the chat. I could text her too. Why don't we go with State Representative Maura Hirschauer at this moment?
All right.
All right.
Illinois State Representative for the 49th District, Maura Hirschauer was the founding member of the Kane and Kendall County chapter of Moms Demand Action, former president and current executive board member of the Batavia Mothers Club Foundation, and a former teacher. She received her BA in English from Colby College in Waterville, Maine, and pursued graduate studies at the University of Colorado. Representative Hirschauer is the primary sponsor for both House Bill 1742 and House Bill 1739, legislation related to sexual assault, which she will explain further.
Thank you, Rebecca. Representative Hirschauer?
All right. Thank you all for having me on tonight. I am coming to you from my non-decorated Springfield office because I've really only been here a handful of times since being elected. And I am really honored to be a part of this group. I want to start by thanking Madeleine so much for sharing your story. Really important, your voice and your advocacy and your bravery in sharing what happened to you is so important. And I think when I listen to your story, it hits all parts of me. I'm a mom of two girls who are almost teenagers. I myself, find sexual assault is a personal issue for me as well. So I'm really grateful for this space where we can all be together and talk about it and really uplift voices. And then the experts on this call, I am just grateful to be in your circle and have our doors of communication open. I've already spoken with Colleen, and you folks are the ones on the ground doing the hard work. And my job in Springfield is to make sure that, I give you all the tools you need legislatively and in statute to uplift survivors and protect people. So, that's really what I'm trying to do here in Springfield. When I took office, I made a conscious decision that advocating for survivors of sexual assault would be one area in which I would like to focus. One of the reasons why is, as I said, it's a personal issue for me. And also in my campaign, which is my very first campaign, I got sort of a taste of negative advertising. It was a brutal campaign season. And one thing I noticed, not even only in my race, but in a lot of other races, I really felt like sexual assault was weaponized in campaign materials. You see it on TV, the sexual assault in Champaign came up a lot in my campaign. And what really bothered me was that there are survivors at the heart of these stories that are being hurt again and again and again as these issues are being brought in and weaponized for political gain. And it was really frustrating for me. And it was for other candidates as well. I had long conversations with candidate Martha Paschke, who came so close to winning up in the 65th district. And then I spoke with Representative Deb Conroy, who at the time was the chair of our Women's Caucus. And she said, I expressed to her how this was really hurting me. And she said, well, you need to use that. And when you go to Springfield, you need to make it a focus of some change that you'd like to make. So we started to take a look at just some changes we thought, looking at the rape kit backlog, what can we do in Springfield to help? And that's where we came up with House Bill 1739, which just passed the House unanimously today. Yeah. So what House Bill 1730 really just clean up and codify the work that had been done in the past General Assembly, establishing the rape kit tracking system. It was left out of one important statute. The Sexual Assault Incident Procedure Act made no mention of the rape kit tracking system. So we wanted to codify that in law to make sure that when law enforcement is meeting with survivors, they know they need to get that important tracking information out. So, you know, we worked hard on that bill in collaboration with the Illinois State Police and with the Illinois Hospital Association, just to make sure that we are recognizing the role that healthcare workers play in distributing information about the tracking system. So that bill is on its way to the Senate, where I think it will be picked up by Senator Villa. Yes, and the second piece of legislation, we did 1742, which passed unanimously in the House last week on Friday. So I feel really proud and honored that my two first bills really center the voices of survivors, and they passed in Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and they passed with unanimous bipartisan support. So I think that's pretty phenomenal. So House Bill 1742 amends the civil no contact order to allow a household or a family member to petition for a civil no contact order on behalf of a survivor. And this bill, in the drafting of this bill, I learned a lot. I learned how important it is to involve all stakeholders. And the very first group that reached out to me was ICASA. And I thought, oh, they're reaching out to me because this bill's so great. They're going to love it so much. And they said, oh, no, we don't like this bill because in my original language, I was not fully centering the survivor. They said, we need to make sure in this bill that the survivor gives permission to the family member or the household member. We need to make sure that that permission is in written form when the judge grants the petition, so that, you know, it's not used against the survivor in a later date. So it was a lesson to me of how important it is to reach out to the folks who are really on the ground doing the hard work, because when you're in Springfield balancing lots of different bills, you could miss something really important like that. So we made those amendments, and it's a really strong bill, like I said, that is now over in the Senate, again, being carried by Senator Villa, who is my state senator. So we have a nice partnership together. And that's it for my legislation. I wanted to, when Madeleine was talking about consent, which is something I think is so important in this conversation, I wanted to put the REACH Act on your radar, which I'm sure many of you might already know about, and I don't have the bill number right at my fingertips, but I see Laura will be getting it. It's funny, my maiden name is Welch, so I grew up as Maura Welch, and you are Laura Welch, so we're like sisters. But so the REACH Act is a comprehensive sexual education curriculum, and we would like to see it mandated across up and down Illinois so that kids of all ages are getting age appropriate. Oh, there, Laura put it in the chat. Age and developmentally appropriate sexual education from kindergarten through high school. And what we mean by age and developmentally appropriate in kindergarten is what my own kindergarten is learning in school, which is who's your trusted adult, what's your personal space, what's other people's personal space. That is what is age appropriate developmental sexual education at kindergarten, and consent starts then. You know, did that person ask you to touch them? No, they did not. You know, they did not give you their consent. So, and consent is really baked in to this act, I think, when we get into middle school and high school, and so important. So I think that's a really important bill to put on your radar and to advocate for. and I can answer questions, or I can just be quiet and let the experts talk from here.
Well, we'll finish with the presentations and then we have a Q&A.
Okay.
So moving to Jean to introduce our last speaker, Laura Welch.
Laura Welch is the founding member of the Will County National Organization of Women, was previously the Illinois now Vice President for Chapter Development, and assisted with the establishment of 3 new statewide chapters. She is currently the President of the Illinois National Organization of Women. Laura also serves as the Reproductive Rights Advisor for the National Council of Jewish Women's Illinois Advisory Council and is a member of the statewide Reproductive Health Coalition.
It's all yours, Laura.
Thank you. Well, Maura, you just led right into what I was going to talk about. I've always said that I believe that children learn what they live. And if children are in a loving home, they're going to see that that's what's expected of them when they go out into society. But not every child is brought up in that kind of an environment. Some children are brought up in where the norm is anger, violence, abuse, and if they don't have anything outside to support them, that's what they think is the norm. And the problem is that that's cyclical, and that can go on further in their lives. But that's not always the case. Not every child that's brought up in a loving home is going to be a wonderful person later on in life, and vice versa. Not every child that's brought up in a bad home is going to be, a bad person. There's so many other factors that go into the cycle of abuse. So many years ago, I was hired to be a development director, or actually establish a development department for child abuse agency. And as the chief fundraising and marketing person, my goal was to show why our organization and our agency was helping break this cycle of violence. But I'm going to be really honest, I had a 2-year-old at the time. And so you can imagine, being the mother of a young child, that this was an incredibly, incredibly tough position to be in. When we started working on a capital campaign, I spent a lot of time down in the preschool that the agency had. And I got to tell you, it got me to my core. And that's why I ended up having to leave after just a few months, because I watched these young children who had been so severely and horrifically abused mentally, physically, sexually. I watched them with play therapy, music therapy, art therapy. And I would on my way home, I would be shaking and I would be crying. And, I often wonder, what happened to these kids? Where are they now? Did they survive? I don't know. So another thing that I remember is when my kids were little, I would spend a lot of time in their classroom because I had that opportunity. But I also remember field days, and I will never ever forget the last field day when my daughter was in elementary school. And it was the littlest children, like grades 1 through 3, or yeah, I think it was like grades 1 through 3. They were so wonderful to each other. They patted each other on the back. They were cheering for each other. They picked each other up when things went bad, and it was just such a wonderful thing. They got to 4th grade, and oh my gosh, it was just across the board. There was bullying, there was mocking, there was laughing. And I'm a parent, I'm not an educator. And so, I could say, hey, you know what, that's not a good idea, but I'm not an educator and I don't have the resources to really, and it's not appropriate on a field day for me to be teaching a child. So anyway, when we look at breaking the cycle of violence for a child, if we do it without these outside resources, if we do it without DCFS or like the Family Resource Center where I worked at, if there's not school nurses, educators, counselors or whatever, it's very difficult to step in and do something to help that child. Because again, if they're in an environment that's really demonic or just really horrific, if they don't have those resources, it's going to be very difficult to help them get into their later parts of their life without further abuse or without potentially becoming abusive. So what we're doing right now is the National Organization for Women is not an organization that provides direct services like the YWCA or ICASA or any of these, the organizations within ICASA. we're an advocacy agency. That's just one of the main things that we do. And so what we're working on right now, in addition to several other bills, are 2 bills actually that are working their way through the legislature right now. One is the REACH Act that the representative mentioned, and that stands for Responsible Education for Adolescent and Children's Health Act. And that bill was introduced by Planned Parenthood of Illinois. The other bill is the Illinois Healthy Youth Act, which is a bill from the ACLU. They're fairly similar, but I'm going to tell you what the differences are. And then I'm going to tell you that there's some fun stuff going on right now. Both of these bills require age-appropriate, medically accurate, trauma-informed, comprehensive, and inclusive personal health and safety education to be taught in our public schools. So the difference is, and there are several, but the very important difference is that the REACH Act would be a mandate for the schools throughout Illinois, all public and charter schools. And it is mandated K through 12. The Illinois Healthy Youth Act is not currently set up as a mandate, and it focuses on grades 6 through 12. Now, it's more of what's called an if-then bill because it's not a mandate. So if sex education or health education is taught, these are the standards. If K through 5 is also taught, these are the standards. So the hope is that these bills get merged, and literally 20 minutes, well, actually it was 11 minutes before the call started, I got some updates. And it's been going back and forth for a little bit this afternoon. So please forgive me if I'm, kind of rambling, because I'm trying to keep up and make sure that I give you the appropriate information. The hope is that the bills get merged, and that it will be one bill that will be mandated K through 12.
Good.
Yes, that we're really, really hoping. And it's right now, it's the sponsors are working together with Planned Parenthood, ACLU, and other advocacy organizations. Sorry, that was just not coming out. If it is a merged bill, it will become in effect for the 2023-2024 school year. If they are not combined, the Illinois Healthy Youth Act is mandated to start August 1st of 2022. Now, as I mentioned, you've heard me talk about the word standards. Illinois is considered a standards state. Now, there are some states that are called curriculum states. A curriculum state is where things are put in place where these are the curriculum. This is what you have to teach. What Illinois does is it sticks with standards. And then it allows the school districts to create their own curriculum based on those standards, but curriculum that is appropriate for their specific school systems. So a school that is downstate Illinois may not have the same needs for health education as a school in the city or a school in the suburbs or what have you. So what the bills aim to do is to follow the national standards. And by doing so, as those standards change, they will already be required in Illinois to follow those standards. So we're not constantly having to rewrite these bills. Sorry, I'm trying to, my notes kind of got mushed up. So it's easy for you folks to say, what in the world does this education have to do with sexual assault? Well, currently, Illinois Now law is fairly antiquated. It's not mandated. In fact, it says if it's taught, then these are the standards. In addition, curriculum has pretty much focused on grades 6 through 12. As I said, the REACH bill will mandate it going from grades K through 12. And let's see, consent is not included. Consent is included in current standards, but the lessons regarding healthy relationships are not included. There are no lessons regarding puberty, anatomy, physiology, or adolescent sexual development. instead of including harmful language regarding gender identity and expression, as well as sexual orientation and identity, sexual identity will be the requirement. So we're changing the language. There's been a lot of things that have become more societally acceptable, understood, studied with regard to gender identity and orientation. And so that will be standard. They immediately are going to have to get rid of that harmful language that is currently being used in the health and sex education curriculum. It's no longer going to be considered just abstinence only. And they do teach contraception. I think my kids said that they used a banana to put the condom on the banana. But it's also now going to include pregnancy and reproduction and prevention of sexually transmitted infections, including HIV. It wasn't included up until now. And finally, prevention and intervention of interpersonal violence will be expanded to include the definition of personal safety and includes resources locally for the students. So in other words, it's going to focus on what really happens with our young people today. We're not going to keep our heads in the sand anymore like some people want us to do, because that's not reality. So I just got this bit of information. The bill language is being updated if it is merged to clarify that personal health and safety education will be taught in grades K through 5, and sexual health education will be taught in grades 6 through 12. They all still need to meet the same standards, age appropriate, medically informed, and what have you. So if they are informed, here's what's going to happen. The youngest students in grades K through 12, and I'm reading this because I want to get it right, grades K through 12 will learn about personal safety, identifying trusted adults, and respecting others. Third graders through fifth graders will build on this with healthy relationships, bullying prevention, harassment and abuse, anatomy, puberty, hygiene, because we all know they start getting a little at that age, body image, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And then the upper grades, again, this is all building. You're starting them when they're little ones and still are kind and generous and expanding on this. So then when they get to grades 6 through 12, they're going to cover issues of consent, sexual harassment, interpersonal violence, the benefits of abstinence, pregnancy prevention, and sexually transmitted infection prevention. So either way, the standards are somewhat similar. It's just when the curriculum is taught and to what, if we go to K through 12. So imagine that there's a younger student being abused at home. Because they learned how to find a safe adult or what's not okay. They're taught at a young age that they can go to a teacher and that young person's going to get help. What if a fifth grader learns that stalking another student on the internet is not okay? They learned it in school. Or that an older student learns that no really means no. So all students are going to have gender inclusivity, religion, respecting someone's religion, respecting their disability. These are all things that are going to become very, very important, and the language is going to reflect that. You think of the young LGBTQ students sitting alone at lunch because they really are just unclear of who they are. They may be having a tough time at home. Hopefully, if they're taught from a young age to support each other, hopefully that young person can be brought into different social situations and not feel quite so lonely. Or because it's talked about, they're not the only one. I always say I talk about my abortion and I get so many people come up and talk to me going, I thought I was the only one that had one that late into pregnancy. So talking about it, letting them know that they're not the only one, that this is, it is part of who we are as society, that potentially can lead to less self-assault or other physical abuses. So, and then one last thing, and this has become more important to many, many, many of you on the phone call, so I'm preaching to the choir. I voted in our local elections, and I know every last one of you did. And we know how important our park districts are, our school boards are, our city councils are. And during the campaign, I'm sure some of you saw that I was railing against some people. And there was a couple of candidates that I brought these two bills up to, and I said, do you support them? And one of them only knew about one of the bills, so I sent them information, never heard back from them. And the other one said adamantly no. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that not just our legislators understand what these bills are, but the candidates. If someone is going to sit on a school board, they better well know what these bills are, and they better stand behind them, because this is what's best for all of the students in our communities. So I did have some slides. I put up the REACH Act bills numbers, and then the Healthy Youth Act. I will put that in the chat as well. As I said, it is very much in flux where these bills are standing, and we really, really, really are hoping that they come together, because it's been very hard to speak with our legislators. It's getting late, isn't it? Here, Beverly's going to share. This is the REACH Act as it currently stands. So you can see what is available for the different age groups and how it builds. And then the other one that I'll put up the bill numbers for the Illinois Healthy Youth Act. And there I'm going to stop talking because my mouth is tripping over itself.
We're going to go back to Maura pretty soon, or Marie rather. We need to check in with Marie and let her finish hers. And thank you, Laura. This was great information. So Maria, are you back with us?
I think so. I hope so.
Good. All right, let's go back to prosecuting.
Right. If I can stay with you for just 5 minutes, maybe stay on the internet for 5 minutes, we can get through. So anyway, I left off at the trial, and I would like to just take a few minutes to go into that, because I think that's a very important step. That is where the survivor / victim, that is where she takes back her control. So you've got the defendant who has done terrible things, right, in the dark, thinking that no one is ever going to know about that. And now she gets an opportunity, or he, the victim, gets an opportunity to tell the world what really happened. Out in the light of day with a court reporter and a judge and lawyers and jurors, say out loud, this is what happened to me. This is what this person did to me. That is when the victim takes back control. That is when he or she moves from fear to empowerment. And it is a strong, wonderful moment. The defendant has to sit there and listen to that. He likes to have control. Like, that's why he did this in the first place. He likes to have control, and he doesn't. He has to sit there. He can't run. He can't hide. He can't not listen. His parents, his siblings, his supporters are sitting in the audience, and they have to listen to it too. This is what he did behind closed doors in the dark when he thought no one was ever going to know, and it comes to light. It's a very, very powerful moment. Even like the sociopaths might sit and smirk, you're like, oh, haha, this has no impact on me, I don't really care. But really, they do, because it's all about control. And so they've lost control. If I can impart one thing for everybody to remember tonight, it would be that a sexual assault is not about sex. It has nothing to do with sexual gratification. It's all about domination and humiliation and control. And so for the victim to be able to take that back on stand is a very powerful moment. There is the cross-examination, which is more difficult for the survivor at that point. Questions can come at her. Well, how do you know this? And, and what did you see? And did you really know him? And are you sure he didn't agree? Those are difficult times. I'm not saying it's an easy thing on the cross-examination, but a woman and a man are no longer able to be cross-examined about the history of their sexual encounters. That has all been outlawed. It's all totally irrelevant. So at least that much is you're saved from. But the power of the direct examination is so strong that women and men who are, the victims here, usually get off the stand feeling very empowered by the whole thing. So when it's all done, and there's a guilty verdict, then it's time for sentencing. So the victim has a big role there, a huge role. It's written into the Illinois Constitution that the victim is allowed to give a victim impact statement. This is a statement that is from your heart. There's no cross-examination. There's no lawyers involved. There's nobody telling you what you should say or what you should not say. This is a statement from your heart. How has this impacted your life? What has this done to your life? You can write it, you can say it, you can sing it. You can cry, you can scream, you can do whatever you need to do in that courtroom, as long as you're, reasonably under control of yourself, but you're speaking from your heart and you're telling the judge who's about to impose sentence, how this affected your life. And a factor in sentencing that he must consider is your statement. So it's another powerful moment. Also at sentencing, if the defendant is not sentenced to jail, let's say he's given a conditional discharge or a probation or something, you can even still then, as one of the things that the judge will do, the victim's advocates will do, is they can put into a condition of his release is that he stays away from you. Sometimes even that he stays out of the entire town that you live in. So there's power there as well. And then very briefly, post-trial, after the trial is done, most American citizens don't realize that the case can stretch on for years and years and years after that. There are many levels of appeal. I won't bore you by going through all of it, but just know that it can go on for many years after the sentencing is done. And the victim advocates in the state attorney's office, their job is to be sure that you are kept apprised of each stage. Every time an opinion comes down, every time there's another ruling, let you know, oh, still in the winner's seat, still doing okay, or we didn't, we have to go back and do it again, but hopefully that's not the case. And then two other things quickly. So one is that in 2014, Illinois amended the Constitution. The Illinois Constitution now contains what is called an Illinois Crime Victims Bill of Rights. This is to be sure that victims have a voice in the prosecution stage. There are 12 enumerated rights. And just to be, for the sake of time, to go through just a couple. One is that a victim has the right to be present at any court hearing. And that means anytime there's going to be anything, even a continuance, you're given notice and the opportunity to come. And once you're in the courtroom, you have an opportunity to be heard. Now, you might have to say to the judge, I want to be heard. You've got to let somebody know that, but you have the right to be heard at any court proceeding. You have the right to be protected from the accused. So if this is a perpetrator that who might be, he's still presumed innocent, right? So he's going to be out on bond, probably going to be out on bond. You have the right to be protected from him before the trial. If it's a domestic violence case, those women always need some level of protection. You have a right to the notice of the conviction, the sentence, the imprisonment, and his date of release. And there is also the right that in sentencing, for the judge to consider the safety of the victim and the safety of the victim's family. All of these things are critical and are written into the Constitution. So the victim is someone that we're very cognizant of and trying to protect. And then just one other footnote, and that is the state legislature, her name I think was Maura.
Maura Hirschauer.
Thank you. So I had fallen off the internet at that point. I missed the introduction. She talked about consent. So when teaching a child about sexual assault, of course, teach the child to say no. But in the eyes of the law, the child never gives consent. There is no such thing as consent. If an adult touches a child, it's a crime. It doesn't make any difference if the child has been groomed, which the perpetrators will do, like groom a child, get the child accustomed to his advances. Doesn't make any difference if somebody under the age of 18 consents, it doesn't make any difference. It's still a crime. So there's no consent in the children's crimes. So anyway, I just want to conclude then, it is a privilege to be here. And again, the most important thing that I would like to communicate is that criminal sexual assault is not about sexual gratification. It's about domination, humiliation, and control. And the best thing that we can do is take that back. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Marie. I'm going to see now where there are questions. Lisa Yost is going to moderate the Q&A, but I have one question, and that's the time it takes to process a rape kit. And that can be for anybody on the call. But when we did this 2 years ago for the Democratic Women of DuPage County, we learned that it can take well over a year for a rape kit to be processed at the Illinois State Forensics Lab. Now, I think that's still the case, but I'm not positive. But in DuPage County, we have a forensics lab, and I know State's Attorney Bob Berlin was our speaker 2 years ago, and he indicated that in DuPage, we can turn around a rape kit in with I think the dates were 56 days. So where do we stand on the turnaround in the testing of rape evidence kits? Anybody have information on that?
Diane, I can answer that a little bit.
Okay.
And I don't remember offhand the exact number of days for our state labs now to process the kit, but it's much lower.
Okay, good.
They've been doing a lot of work at the with labs in terms of even how they're processing and whatnot. So it's not over a year anymore for sure.
Well, that's under here. Because
yeah, it's
that
under
was
a
so
year.
discouraging.
Yeah, it's not as fast as DuPage County Lab, but it's DuPage County Lab and the state lab also use different. They don't do everything the same. They have different ways of doing things. So yeah,
that's great to know, because I know we have training and funding and making women and men sexual assault a priority, and maybe it's getting better. That's movement in the right direction. So Lisa, what questions have you got?
Diane, can I follow up just one thing here?
Yeah.
As far as the state forensic lab goes, I was working with a couple of those people down at the state lab in COVID. And part of what has happened is sometimes it takes 14 months to 2 years to hire somebody into a state job. Mm-hmm. And these two young people had been the latest addition that had finally come on there at the state forensic lab. So when you get people into the positions to do these jobs, things start rolling, because when they were telling me about the backlogs of stuff when they got there, not only with this, but with everything. And these two are bottom of the totem pole, but they were working. And so it does help to get people there.
So funding and training and the people in place, all of that makes a difference. Thank you, Barb. As you know, Barb works with the Illinois Department of Public Health, so she can speak from some knowledge base here. Okay, let's talk to Lisa. Where's Miss Lisa Yost?
Right here.
Okay, Lisa.
I'm just going to throw these questions out to whoever would like to answer them, but as a follow-up, the backlog on these kits, is that due to not having the funding for the personnel to analyze them, or is that another issue, that there aren't people, or the reason for the backlog?
Barb, you want to address that again, or maybe one of our speakers?
Well, I do know that the backlog they've been chipping away at it slowly, but again, you can't reverse the entire backlog while trying to control overtime with the amount of people that they have. I don't know where they are now. I can't even speak to that, but it was a personnel issue as far as the state lab went.
Oh, okay. And then what happens to those kits once the evidence has been presented? Do they keep them, or do they dispose of them in some particular way?
Maybe Marie can answer that.
I know they're kept through trials. So the evidence in any trial is impounded throughout the trial, and then afterwards through the state has laws about this, but certainly through the entire appeal process, which again goes for years and years. So that kit would still be there, would still be in a file in the police department somewhere for, I would say, as many as 10 years after the trial. After that, I would assume that they would destroy it, but I'm assuming that, I don't know.
Thank you. As a former educator, I'm thrilled to hear that there is going to be some curriculum related to this. One question that I have from someone the same way that companies are mandating training for sexual harassment, has there ever been an effort to provide this much needed skills, sexual assault training in corporate America?
How about you, Colleen? You work with corporations and the police departments. You think it's extending into the corporate world?
So sexual harassment obviously has been extended into the corporate world. In terms of sexual assault and gender-based violence past that of sexual harassment, there is no legislation mandating that corporations have training on it at this point.
Okay. And this one will probably be for Kerry. I know that nurses and doctors, it sounds like, have professional training, but can that training to be a SANE personnel, can that be provided? Can paramedics do that as well? Or any other medical profession take that training?
In terms of being a SANE or a sexual assault nurse examiner, it is just for nurses. There's a like a physician position, a sexual assault forensic examiner. But paramedics at this point it's right now just nurses and doctors.
Okay.
Sorry, there is part of SACETA in the last year and a half has mandated some training for emergency room staff, nurses, physicians, so that anyone now that comes in contact with sexual assault patients in the emergency department has to take a baseline 2-year training. I'm sorry, 2-hour training.
Okay.
That was wishful thinking, right?
Are these examinations always done in an emergency room?
Yes.
And
yes.
Okay.
Some patients will present to a physician's office, but the funding for patients that pays for the exam and for their follow-up care can only be initiated with care that's initiated in the emergency department. So, and doctor's offices, nobody else has any training on doing the exams.
I've got a couple of questions in the chat. One of them is, how do we fill witness slips for legislations mentioned in today's call?
So I did link into the chat. So there is a link in the chat from the ACLU on how to file witness slips for the state of Illinois, but somebody else can definitely answer that question more in depth as well.
Maura, are you still on?
I am. You know, I'm sure that link that Colleen provided gives you a good step process, but if you go to ilga.gov and type in the bill number that you want, it would be easier. You know, I actually think it's a really good webinar that we could all it's like hard, it's weirdly hard to explain. That it's not as intuitive as you would think. So I would take a look at that link that Colleen but I will let you know that witness slips do make a really big difference. They're when we present our bills in committee, the witness slips are read. It's one of the first things folks look at when they're looking to see what kind of support a bill has. So witness slips are important, and lots of times groups that are on the other side of issues from where we all stand are really good at mobilizing witness slips in opposition. So the more we can become familiar with witness slips, the stronger our legislation will be.
Maybe one more question, and this might be for Marie and Maura. How different are definitions of sexual assault across the country? Is there or has there ever been a federal statute defining sexual assault?
So we need to distinguish between state law and federal law. So generally speaking, a crime like this is a matter of state law, right? It happens in one place. Federal law encompasses things that would cross the borders or that would impact the entire country. So there is a sexual assault statute in the federal statute, in the federal code, that would cover if there was I suppose if there could have been a sexual assault on federal grounds, or also if there is a sexual assault that started in Illinois and ended up in Indiana, let's just say. But that would not be something that would govern the individual states. Individual states are free to make their own laws. So anyway, in terms of difference among the different states, again, each state is free to make its own statute. But there is communication among the states when enacting that kind of criminal justice laws. So I can't say that they're all identical. I certainly can't say that, but the general principle is there, right? You know, you can't rape a child. And the sexual assault in Illinois is any sexual touching, any touching at all qualifies as a sexual assault. Because it's very, you know, that's very intrusive, it's very invasive. I happen to be doing something unrelated, and a young girl approached me to say, "Oh, I want to call the police. I need to see DCFS." And there had been it was a touching that was undoing to her. So that was in every way a sexual assault. So even a touching is in a minor touching is still diminishes the personhood and diminishes her confidence, and it was in every way an assault. So I guess I'm rambling here. I guess I believe the statutes among the states are fairly similar. I'm done. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess the one other real quick thing also is that we have Title IX laws. I'm not the expert here, but I know Colleen and I have worked a little bit on the Title IX. There was a lot of massive changes from the previous administration that were incredibly harmful for young people on college campuses. But again, the jurisdiction, I think, is something that I'm not, that is a federal law, but I don't know how the states come into that. And hopefully, all I can tell you is that hopefully we can go back to a better sense of normalcy and more victim or survivor-centered laws with the new administration.
Okay.
Anything else, Lisa?
I think that's about it.
Well, we're going to conclude with Kate Refine. Well, maybe before we go to Kate, this has been an amazing meeting. I've just been so touched and so moved by Madeleine's story, for one, and for the expertise each of you bring to the table, and the donations to the closet. I didn't want to click on it. I was afraid I would leave the call. So maybe can we just send a donation to the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago Rape Crisis Center? Does that work, Colleen?
Yeah, you absolutely can. So you can definitely send a donation. Just make sure in the memo part, you allocate it to sexual violence support services. Also, if you want to make a donation, so I did put the donation link in there again, but if you want to make a donation through our 5K website, you can definitely do that. And then I wanted to just touch base real quick because I know this is about sexual assault in our community. So I ran some numbers very fast from our last fiscal year. In terms of advocacy, we responded in person for a hospital call, a police department, or the courthouse to 242 victims or survivors. I also use that language interchangeably. And
242 for what year? Last year?
So for fiscal year 20. So, yep.
242.
242. And we provided counseling services for 336 people. Either those were survivors or their non-offending loved ones.
Wow. Thank you, Colleen.
Great work.
So thank you once again to everyone. This has been amazing. I had this program kind of in place in 2019, but it's even better tonight. Marie, you added an awful lot to our presentation, and Representative Hirschauer, you were amazing. And having all of us on the call tonight together to talk about an issue that's so rarely talked about. It's, when you think of the numbers of people affected, it's right up there with the pandemic, and that's every year. I mean, that's ridiculous. I think the new bills that will work on education, Madeleine's point, it's not always the girl's responsibility to know where the boundaries are. Talk to these young men and vice versa, men versus women, and everyone needs to know. It's not just one person's or one gender's issue. So I'm going to conclude the program by turning it over to Kate Refine, who's going to give you the headlines for May. Kate?
Sorry, I always forget to unmute myself. Thanks everybody for speaking tonight, sharing your stories. Really appreciate it. If you want to join us on May 20th, we're going to be doing a hybrid, people that are comfortable. We're going to start meeting in person. We can wear masks and be social distance. We're going to do a postcard party. We'll also have Zoom for people that don't want to be. We're going to be sending thank you for voting for the first time we have 2,500 postcards to swing states. We're going to be targeting North Carolina and thanking the first time voters in North Carolina for voting. And there's going to be other things that we're going to be getting involved with, but we know that that state's going to be targeted and we want to keep those voters voting. But again, thanks to everybody, and hopefully May 20th, we'll see you in person or see you on Zoom, and we'll share the details of what it's going to be. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Kate.
Good to see you.
Anything further for the good of the group? Then we'll conclude. It's almost 9 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful. I can't thank you enough. Hopefully we've made a difference, and the awareness that we're building in this April will result in fewer than 242 calls in a year or so, maybe half that number. So thank you very much, and we'll conclude now. Bye-bye, everybody.
Well, and congratulations, Flo and Lisa and Jean.
Well, yeah.